Welcome to this evening's edition of The Collective. My name is Michelle Turner, and I'm so happy you could join us. Today's guest is someone who I have known for quite some time and is well known in African American circles as the photographer for your event in New York City. Gerald Peart has been in photography about 30 years. He's self-taught. He has worked with the NAACP, Essence Communications. He's gone overseas and done various events. And he's done things around New York City, the Associated Press, Time Magazine. But he's the kind of person that doesn't really talk about it. He likes for his work to prove his skill. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the collective a good friend, a mentor, and big brother, Gerald Peart. Hey, Gerald.
How you doing, Michelle? Thank you very much for those kind words.
You're welcome. Well, I mean, knowing the quality of your work and knowing you as long as I have, and you came with very high recommendations about your work from our mutual friend, it's a pleasure to have you on and to talk a little bit about what you do and how you do it.
Okay.
So when you say you're self-taught, how did you fall into photography? Because if my memory serves me correctly, you were in banking, you were in finance.
Yes, I was.
So how did that leap, or how did you make that leap from finance to photography?
I can't say it was very easy, but it was just something I just picked up. Had a small little point and shoot camera at the time, was a Ricoh. And in doing so, I just kind of just went from one Ricoh camera to the next and it was about the camera itself. Every camera is like a tool, and the more you learn something about it, you want to find out what's the next model. So the interest was to find out, how can I get to the next step using another device within the same model? A lot of guys were shooting Canon and Nikon and Leica because they went overseas. Ricoh was one that came upon me. So I had just about every Ricoh camera that there was.
Japanese camera, right?
Definitely, they are Japanese, basically. You all do the same thing. But at that time, you had Nikon and Canon that were just monopolizing the market. And then you had Minolta. Then they failed years because they went into, basically Minolta was office copy machines.
Right.
So the Ricoh, it was good to me for a while. Then I found out about other models and played around with them. Then I started buying used equipment here and there. My thing is, to buy a new piece of equipment costs a lot of money. And when you're trying to learn something about something, why should you pay top dollar if you don't have to? So I was one of the components about shopping around, trying to find the best possible deals for the least amount of money. And that's what I did. So when guys out there shooting the Canon and Nikon, I had my Ricoh, and I was getting the job done at the same time. Now, a friend of mine would say, all I knew was one setting, which was 5.6. And that's all I knew. I knew that whenever fell into those spectrums, I knew what the camera could do. It wasn't until I started meeting other photographers and I found out about the other settings, which were there. And then also the lab I was going to. He was telling me, try this, try that. So they saw I had something there, and I would get a little bit of tips here and there. And then one day there was an event in Riverside Park with some actors, Copper Cunningham, and said, to go out to the Daily News. This is when Coming to America was coming out.
Okay.
Eric LaSalle was at that. It's like a annual picnic that they had. They had Pepsi Cola, Coca-Cola sponsors, a lot of actors and actresses there. So go down to the Daily News. So I called them up. They said, come on down. And they saw the photographs. And they didn't use it, but they processed my film. My mind started turning. I said, you know what? if I can do this way, why not call them every time? And then soon I got to know the photo editors, and that became my out. If I was doing events or out there just doing some freelance work, I would call them up. So you had within 30 seconds to pitch the story.
Yeah.
Come on in. They process the film. If they use it, you got paid. If not, you keep on going, give you more film. And I got to know some of the editors very well. And next thing you know, that was one aspect. And I think before I mentioned, I actually did not mention the NYABJ. I was watching television one afternoon, on a Sunday afternoon, and they had a TV show on. And I said, wow, journalists, maybe they deal with photography. They did, but they didn't. They were basically interested in the writers. So when I came on board, I was kind of shifting their mindset that you need photographs to go with the writers.
Yeah, and that's the New York National Association of Black Journalists, right?
Yeah. And then along the way, I met a mutual good friend of ours, Mark Griffith. And then through that association, friendship, things started to open up more and more. I learned about Newsday, the News, the Associated Press, and that's when things started to open up, and then started meeting more people along the way. Plus, I was shooting for the New York Beacon at the time, which is now, actually Big Red, which is now the New York Beacon. And when you go to assignments, you see other photographers, you see PR people. And then once again, I was at another event, at the Studio Museum in Harlem, and a woman by the name of June Truesdale, who was doing photography on the side for a full-time job, said, why don't you contact these people, which was the Roman company at the time. And was photographing honeycombs, the honeycombs and a few other intact. And that started a relationship from there. They handled McDonald's, which is around McDonald's House Charities, and that opened up more doors. So
when did you quit finance?
1986, 87, I think it was. I mean, it was like there was too much time being spent running around, and I enjoyed doing it. And I said, you know what? I'm going to put in my 2 weeks. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I just said, let me go for it. I didn't want to wait until I was 40 to say, if I could have, would have, should have. I got a lot of pushback from family, and I said, you know what? I'm going to try it. I had nothing to lose. I was still young. And I said, go for it. So at some point, you have to go with what's in your gut and make that decision. It wasn't easy, but at the same time, I had a lot of fun.
But that's what I was going to ask. You know, was like any profession in the beginning, there's always a struggle.
Sure.
But obviously, it didn't turn you around.
No, it didn't. It didn't bother me.
What made you decide that this is what I want to do? Besides you enjoying it, what were you getting from it? What was the, as the kids say now, what were the feels that you were getting?
Well, wow. Basically, I enjoyed doing it with the challenge of mastering the camera and settings within it. That was one thing. But at the same time, I'm going out, I'm going to different places, I'm meeting different people. I would see Chester Higgins at the New York Times, I was there, Muhammad, Michelle Eggins. I saw all of them in their young stages. And Michelle, she came from DC. There was a gentleman by the name of Jim Cummins, who shot sports at the for Newsday. So seeing these black photographers out there, not saying it only inspired me, but I asked questions. One of the things is that I tell folks, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I was lucky that the fact that I made that decision, I had nothing to lose. There was no expectation for me. There was no pressure to succeed. So basically, it was hit or miss. But along the hit or miss, they saw something. And that was the drive that kept me going. And from there, as I just said by my bio, I was able to travel around the world. I picked up a few accounts, Essence, about 6 Essence Awards, nonprofit organizations, AXO, when I was teaching with them. But it was fun. To me, Photography is like a jigsaw puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
You have the framework. You get a call for an assignment. You have the framework. How do you fill the pieces in? You're in control of filling in those pieces. But keep in mind, it's not really about you. What are you bringing to the table that day when that call comes in? Do you have the responsibility to ask, the editor or the person that calls you, why am I there today?
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do? So it's not what about I'm going to do. What are we going to do to produce this end product? And to me, that was the drive, putting together those pieces. And
so did you get a lot of flack in the beginning? Like, okay, like you said, you only knew one setting on your camera and somebody turned you on to doing it different ways. But did other photographers who didn't know you sort of say, okay, what is this guy doing here?
Yeah, but I didn't care. I didn't care. I didn't care. Listen, they wasn't paying my rent. They wasn't paying my bills. Wasn't taking care of my household. And
right.
That was foremost. And I had the challenge was at home. How do I maintain a home? The wife and the kid at the time and still do that. And at the time that I made that decision, my ex-wife at the time was home, raising our daughter. And then when she graduated from college, I said, you know what, now let me try this right now. At least let me give it a try. You was home 4.5, 5 years, you went back to school. At the end, you got a degree. Make believe I had to change the scenario. Make believe I'm an apprentice or I'm in first year of school. So I changed that mindset in her to think, let me try this. But that still wasn't getting across because it's like, are the bills getting paid? Where's the money coming in from that? But I did not care. I made a decision. I said, you know what? Let me try this. If I fail, fine. But I still had the banking expense behind me if I needed to go back to it. And fortunately, it didn't happen that way. I turned the other wheel and went forward.
There is a difference between event photography, news photography, and portrait photography.
Yes.
So when you would do something for the Associated Press, how was that different for shooting Essence?
Well, it's not when the Associated Press came into play. It wasn't that I was actually shooting for them. I would contact them while doing other things as I'm freelancing because I knew that the AP will pick it up right then and there. So if I'm out just freelancing, I can go to any outlet I want to go to. So that's the reason why I went to the Daily News, Newsday, AP, and UPI because they would run it first, and plus they process my film. So when you're talking about if you're shooting 5-6 rolls of film at that time, $5-6 a roll of film out of your pocket, that's $30 plus $40. Then service. So that helped to minimize the cost and maximize the effect. So they saw the work I was bringing in. They said, you know what? Can you do A, B, C, and D? So when I'm out there in the field and something I'm working on, I will call them first. They said, listen, we have a photographer, fine. And I'll call Daily News. You got a photographer, I'll call Newsday. So you build up those things along the way. So just as well as, people say, well, they're counting their bricks. I'm counting contacts. Building those relationships that way, because doors don't open up for you. They peek you into the door, but how you get to that door and work within that door is a different ball game. And I was good at doing that. I would go and look at the bulletin boards. I would go down to the cafeteria, walk around the building, see what division of AP was going on. They had a European division, West Coast division, and then you meet them photographers, a little conversation, and then you learn from them.
So shooting, even though you were a freelancer, shooting for Associated Press is different for shooting for Essence. How? What's the fine line? What's the difference?
If I'm pitching to the Associated Press, that's because I'm already out there. I got a call from say the Big Red News, but that pay was not a paid salary. They were paid on a per print basis. So they wanted to print, 4 or 5 days later. AP ran that night. So if they processed that film, I would get paid and move on from there. Now, shooting for Essence was a different story. That's building up through associations, organizations. Terry Williams, for example, I met her in my early years, and she was doing the PR for the Essence magazine. The Essence Awards came at the time. She recommended me to Essence. So when Essence saw my work, they said, oh. So while I'm doing every event leading up to the Essence Awards itself, there might have been 5 or 6 events that week lead up to the awards. So then you have all the sponsors. You had your AT&Ts, you had your Toyota, the PepsiCo. Every event, you was able to meet the representatives of these major corporations. And then you build that reputation that way. But foremost, your foremost responsibility is who? To Essence.
Right.
Because you can't kind of double dip, because it doesn't make any sense. You're going to get caught that way. So know what your focus is. I'm there representing Essence first.
Now, when you say double dip, what do you mean? Like, you can't work for AT&T while you're working for Essence, even though you're a freelancer, or are you under contract with Essence?
I was under contract with Essence. Essence hired me. When Terry brought me on board, I'm working for Essence. So everything I shot was for Essence. The Time Warner.
And that was like what, Gerald? Was that like more like group pictures, people coming into the awards, portraits, or was it varied?
That was press conferences. That was award. That was step and repeat. That was backstage. That was award. That was, let's see, small workshops. So, for example, Johnson, they would have a thing where they dealt with children programs. So we would shoot that with Johnson Johnson. Then Toyota might have a book signing party, a book signing luncheon. They might have another sponsor that does a founders dinner. So all of along the way. But remember, I'm on the contract for Essence. But I'm making contacts with these people, because Essence was only, 3 months out of the year when you look at it. It wasn't the entire year.
Right. So it was a quarter.
It was a quarter. So you take care of that responsibility first. In the meantime, you're still making relationships with other people. Say, I'm open to do business if you need my services. And they would call me. And then that's how it went. So you build your client base that way. It wasn't easy, but it was fun.
So whirling back around to New York National Association of Journalists, Black journalists.
NYBJ, yes.
When you stepped up and said, hey, y'all need to really kind of bring photographers into this, how much pushback did you get? Because you said initially, and I think that was the thing with most NABJ chapters, right? Yeah. They were taking in the print reporters.
Yes.
They weren't really looking at broadcast reporters or photographers. It was strictly and solely print. Yes. The writers, as you said.
Yes. But yet they recognized the fact that photography was important. For example, the New York Times. Okay, I went to New York Times to photograph Don Hogan Charles. So, but most of the Black photographers and reporters and broadcast journalists were part of NABJ, which is the National Association,
right,
as opposed to the New York Association. So they would want their sponsorship dollars, okay, but at the same time, would not give credit to those photographers in that regard. So my thing is this: if I'm going to New York Times to photograph Don Hogan Charles, then why can't we get film from the New York Times? Why can't New York Times process our film? If the Daily News is one of your sponsors and going to run ads, why can't the Daily News process our film? So I'm thinking that way, because I was already doing that on my own anyhow, building that relationship. So I was bringing that to the fold. But when I met Mark, that whole thing changed. because basically with the organization, it was a volunteer situation. And I learned from that. I was able to sharpen my skills as a photographer, but at the same time, learn what journalism was all about. So once again, that's not going to journalism school, not going to photography school, not going to business school. Everything was learning on the job. And I didn't mind.
Kind of on the fly, huh?
On the fly. So you learn from your mistakes.
And once Mr. Griffith pushed you that way, you sort of kind of stayed that way for a minute, right?
I stayed that way for a minute, and it was good. We had the convention when it was here in New York. I knew a gentleman at Kodak. I think his name was Bob Jones. And I contacted Bob, and they said, we normally don't do this locally, because they would do promotions at major photography outlets. For example, they'll go to B&H and do a presentation, Adorama, Pro Photo. I said, hold up here. We buy your film. I said, the only way that I can understand your film, give me samples. At that time, Kodak was constantly changing over their film every 2 or 3 months because of our skin tone. If you look,
right.
It was kind of red every time. It all depends on who processed the film would determine how the Essence Magazine, Black Enterprise, Time Inc., Life, how was our skin tone being shifted?
And it's interesting that you say that, because over the past, for me, 10 years, you know, I have a brown baby. You know, my daughter is brown.
Okay.
And so looking at different pictures that were taken of her over the years, her true skin color was never reflected. And I knew it was because of the film, but I couldn't find a way to get around that. I should have probably asked you.
Well, film was one thing, but also what paper is being processed on.
Yes.
So if you went to those labs, you would find Fujika, Fujism.
Yeah.
Fuji was processing. They had Kodak machines, and then they had different papers. Different papers responded to different film. Now, along the way, I started shooting Konica film. And to me,
but now, what kind of paper were you using?
No, I never.
And
I never developed.
Okay. So would you recommend a particular paper with a particular film?
Well, it's hard to say because you can't control it. You're not going to run around the city trying to find a custom lab that's going to work on a particular paper. They buy what they feel is in stock. I mean, remember, also, they have different levels of doing business. They have the intermediate photographer, and then they have the pro photographer. So they would charge accordingly. For example, I don't know if you remember Best Color back in the day. There were popular stores around the city. The major lab was in Queens, so they would process, the everyday folks at one price. For Pro Photo, they would process at another price. Why? Because it was in their mind, it was custom. Now, what I found out is that I don't know if you remember the little newsstands that was around the city.
Right.
Okay, they were also taking film, which was much cheaper than Best Photo, Intermediary, and Best Photo Pro. So what I would do, once I found that, I said, you know what? Process the film, take out the red, and do not cut the negatives. So once I did that, I saw the difference between what they were doing at the regular newsstand compared to me going to the best color, even though it goes to the same lab. But if you give instructions, they will follow that instructions. So when they printed, it was less red. So less red then shifted to the color tones.
Yeah, now, because over the years,
yes,
Mia's pictures have gotten more to her true skin color than they ever have.
Right.
Part of that is because it's cell phone photography, but when things are also printed out, it's her true color.
Yes.
Wait, hold that thought. We got a break.
Okay.
This is The Collective. on WSME Enlightenment Radio. This is my guest. That way. Yep, I got it right. That way. That way. Gerald Peart, photographer extraordinaire out of New York City. We'll be back after this.
Okay.
Returning back with Gerald Peart on The Collective. My name is Michelle Turner, and this is an episode where we are focusing not only on Gerald's career, but we're also talking about photography and different ways things are done and looking at the levels of photography, especially for somebody who is a freelance photographer like Gerald. Gerald's self-taught. He's been doing this probably 30 plus years, has done Essence, has done events overseas, has worked for Time Magazine, Newsday, the Associated Press, all as freelance or as a freelance photographer. So we welcome him again to The Collective. Gerald, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So before we were in the break, we were talking about you asking the printer to take the red out of the mix and how that helped make African Americans look more like their actual skin color, right, as opposed to what that red would do.
Yes.
And when you did that and you started requesting it, was it something that caught on, or was that something that was just privy to you?
Well, I don't know what happened to other folks, but once you build a relationship and you ask those questions, it made a difference. And I then found another lab. His name was John. He was down in Chinatown, and then he moved to Fashion Institute on 7th Avenue. Mm-hmm. And from there, John saw the work that I was bringing in, so he would point out different things to me. And he will color correct my work. He would say, Gerald, shoot at this ISO, change this setting. And it made me a better photographer. So there was some time.
Did it take you long to catch on to that though? Or was it like, okay, I'll do this as an experiment, just go outside and shoot some things and see what that looks like. So by the time you got to the next event, you kind of had it in your mind's eye that this would work?
Well, once you're shooting, you know what you're shooting. Like I said, my fixture was 100 ASA 5.6. So I would buy the box in bulk, 100 rolls at a time, and the cost was less. And 100 ASA was the film setting, and I shot 5.6 f-stop. So I knew.
Okay, so explain the terminology you just used.
ASA, or this, will be the grade of the film. So if you look at cameras now, you have ISO 100, 200, 400, 800, 600, 1300. This would be the shutter. This would be the shutter speed. Mm-hmm. However, when it came to film, we had 100, 200, 400, 800. Now, the higher the ASO on the film, the more the image would capture. However, as you got higher, the film became more grainy.
Okay.
So over the years, the film has since changed. At one point, I think Fuji came out with a film where you can process their film in color processing, but you get black and white results. So basically, in reverse, the lower the ISO of the film, which is either 100 or sometimes you can buy 64, then the tightness of the grain will become very tight. Therefore, when you blow it up, you can blow up 20 by 30, a life-size photograph and not see any pixels in the film.
Okay.
So there were two variables that was going on. The shutter speed will determine how fast you capture the image. Your film will determine the clarity and the quality of your end product. So
Okay.
all of those variables also mix into also how much light is coming in. So there's a lot of
Okay.
variables involved. So once you find out that sweet spot for yourself, that's what works. Now, moving forward in this day and age, this new technology, you can go anywhere from 30 on the shutter speed all the way to 2400, 6400 on the shutter to get a good shot.
But is that faster or slower?
Well, 6400 is very fast, but you have to have a lot of light to produce that. For example, if you're shooting concerts and you can't, and you're shooting available light, you need a high ISO, but also a fast shutter speed. So your f-stop would now become at least a 2.8 lens. The 2.8 lens is one of the fastest lenses that you can buy, but very expensive because the lower the f-stop, 2.8, 1.7, 1.4, that means you have a heavier piece of glass. And the glass is going to be bigger. And therefore, cost more money because you're reproducing more. Now, the average 5.6 is like shooting daylight, and you can basically what you see from your eye. Now, when you shoot 2.8, 1.4, you basically blurring out the background. So all the other variables come into play, depending upon what you're shooting.
Okay.
For example, sports, you need a fast shutter speed.
Okay. So tell me or tell my audience about the trips to Africa. How did that happen?
Yeah, the first trip was with CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality. It was 1996. They were transferring from military rule to democracy, and I was already doing some work with CORE. They had the annual Martin Luther King Awards dinner in New York, was one of their biggest fundraisers. And I was doing other small programs. They said, listen, we have a job for you, but we can't pay you that much. Do you want to go to Africa? I said, sure. So when you look at it, at that time, $1,000 to $1,200 was not a lot of money in today's marketplace. But considering that first class round trip, hotels paid for, food is paid for, then they paid for no ground transportation, that was like found money.
Now, how long did you stay? How long were you there?
About a week to
Nice.
10 days. And we went all around to the different sites. We was in Abuja, Kona State, and the electoral process was kind of crazy. So whereas in America, people go to the ballots, and so you see lines, either outside or inside. People were literally standing in the sun from 6 o'clock in the morning, and someone standing on a table. So whoever is lined up behind that table, that's how they voted in that particular region. I have a photograph in one situation where I was in almost like a small classroom where people would have to reach in to sign in. Now I'm in the classroom taking photographs of people just wanting to vote. Now this is before digital. So, it was a whole different ball game at that time. But well worth the trip, educational for me. I said that in going to Africa, that I was going to sit by the river and my feet will be dangling. I'm going to be writing all these spiritual, but it didn't happen. I didn't write not one thing, but I shot all this film.
Yeah, because you didn't have time.
I didn't have time. I was just shooting and shooting. Then we went back again in 2008. I mean, I'm sorry, 1998 as a follow-up because there was shifting in government and so forth. Then I got a call by with the Nigerian consulate to document a thing called the Abuja Carnival. And they started in 2004. So basically, this was a promotion to build tourism in Nigeria. The president went to Brazil and said, you know what, let me come back here and celebrate our people. So you have, I think now it's by 36 states. So every state was represented in that four-day festival. And I was just shooting crazy. I must have shot about 3,000-4,000 images.
Wow. And how long did it take you to process that?
Well, I was trying to process every day with what limited knowledge that I had. Remember, lack of electricity, okay, not having the tools, not really understanding, how to transfer from the camera to the computer, building files, not to where I know now.
Yeah.
So some of the tools that I picked up now for myself in terms of workflow, if I would have had those back then, who knows where this would be.
Yeah.
But it's love. I just enjoy it, and I enjoy just passing on information to people, getting them to understand that it's beyond you. It's not about the camera. Understand why you're there, and just find your voice, like you found your voice in radio. Same thing.
Which leads me to asking you about AXO.
Yes.
How many years have you done that? And explain what AXO is.
The 10 years of AXO. AXO is the Academic, Cultural, and Technical Science Olympics. Vernon Jarrett.
Sponsored by the NAACP.
Sponsored by the NAACP. Vernon Jarrett, who was a major journalist out of Chicago, founded the AXO program. And he said, if we can have the Olympics every 4 years, why can't we have an academic Olympics? So wherever the NAACP was in a particular state, and they had different branches, so they had different segments across the country. So New York City covered, you had branches in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, Queens, but they all came under New York City AXO in that regard. Some states only were able to send 1 or 2 kids. New York sent about 20 to 30 people at a time. So
wow.
It was a big thing. So when I came on board, I was asked to just come and just talk to the kids, but I wound up staying. And I used to bump heads with the director because all they wanted was winners. Those kids that get gold medals, going to nationals. But for me, it was about learning about photography. So I never taught before. So I had to create a learning platform. One of the lessons I picked up on was Gordon Parks. We had just talked about Gordon Parks that Saturday. And unfortunately, he passed away earlier on that following week. So I came in that Saturday and I talked to kids, and I said, so what happened this past week? They said, I don't know. So I asked in a different way. And one guy said, what Gordon Parks got to do with us? And then I kind of lost it. Gordon Parks and I did.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I can visualize.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to be nice in what I was saying, but we have the same, same initials, GP. I photographed him 6 times. AP picked up 4. So I felt a personal connection to Gordon Parks. I have about 4 or 5 of the books which he had signed. So there was a personal connection for me. The last photograph was with Johnny Cochran during the Songs of My People project at the New York Museum, I think, 105th, 103rd, and but with the kids, I said, you know what? I don't care if you cut and paste, but go home and bring me something back on Gordon Parks. I don't care if they copy it. I wanted them to see someone that's lived a life of doing what you're trying to do. You're doing this just for the prize. But to me, this is a labor of love. If you learn something along the way, then you've learned something.
Yeah.
That was my intent. And it came back. And so I would then push the arm up even further. So what did you see? Get them to think differently. And one of his famous photographs was American Gothic.
Right.
I was hoping that some of the kids would just go a little bit deeper. Don't just do the assignment. Go further. Maybe you might find something along the way that might spark you. So as far as the lesson plans, I said, how am I going to do this? I said, you know what? Pick a color. Take 10 photographs. I don't want 10 doors. So if you pick red, you might have a red flower, red sign, red door. I don't think, but something different every time. So we would sit in class and go around the table talking about why you chose that picture. Then the next assignment, I would tell them, go out and photograph 10 words. Now make a sentence. So I'm asking these kids to do this. I hadn't done that myself. It's now forcing me to think differently. And that changed the whole dynamic. But
with that, Gerald,
yes,
how has doing things digitally affected you?
It was a challenge.
And are you adjusted? Are you adapted?
I've adjusted and adapted. When it first came out, I didn't know anything about the computers. To me, everything was too expensive at the time. And then one photographer ran into us, listen, why don't you rent the camera? You know, so I rented the camera a couple of times just to see how it would go.
What kind of camera was it?
That was a Fuji.
Okay.
I wound up having just about every model within that Fuji line. But the only drawback about that was it took AA batteries, and they were always running out. You couldn't find a charger for that.
Ooh.
But at the same time, I got to know. Actually, it was, I think, Adorama. If you rented the camera 2 or 3 times on the use, you're able to buy it at the discounted price. At that time, when Fuji came out, it was going for about $1,500, $1,800. So to buy a used one over time, for about $1,000 was worth it. So I would put $500 in cash and charge the other half. So making small payments at the time. When you go out and do an assignment, you got paid $300, $400 here and there. So that cut the cost down. The first time I used the camera, I was and their photographer did not show up. So they said, listen, you're hired. So that assignment took care of the rental and a down payment towards the camera. But the turnover was very hard to transition from film to digital. A lot of people at that time were very into computers, so it was easy for them to understand the mechanics. So it took me a while to get to that point. But now I've since moved on. I'm still within the digital realm, but I'm now doing video.
Okay.
And that's a blessing for me. And once again,
is it easier?
It is easy. Basically telling a story. I mean, it's if I can shoot a story in 150 images or less, I mean, you can do the same thing on video. I mean, but the camera is basically sitting there. All you're doing is editing it. However, the new format with the camera I have now, which is one of the Panasonic cameras, is called hybrid photography, which is taking still photography and doing short video clips. So every time I go out to shoot film, to shoot an assignment, I'm always shooting video clips, maybe 10, 15 seconds here and there, because it adds to the storyline.
Yeah. And it's almost like you said, not only is it storytelling, but it's almost like a mini documentary, right?
Yes, indeed.
Because it's fact. You're at the particular scene in that moment, and then you're playing back the actual action, if you will, through video.
And it's coming from your eyes. So, for example, and also you can pull good still photographs from a video clip, but you have to once again know the settings of your know what your camera can do. So that takes time. So sometimes I'm in the house, I'm photographing, the television, I'm videotaping this here and there, just to fine tune those skill sets. So,
best picture you've ever taken? Besides the one of me.
Wow. Okay. Which genre?
You tell me.
We can go from music to just everyday stuff. I like flowers. Flowers do not complain. They don't have to be made up. They're always in bloom if you catch them right. Now music. I've photographed a lot of musicians and singers, and it's just understanding their music, their song, and their voice. And I've
But
captured
Gerald,
it.
you gotta have a shot where you said, "This looks really good." Come
Yeah,
on, man. I know you do. I know
yeah,
you do.
yeah. Um, Miles Davis is, I would say, one of the most memorable ones. Besides photographing Gordon Parks, the 6 times, but Miles
Yeah.
Davis is one that has been cherished by a few people, to name a few. I'm going to say flowers, little girls. Like when I was in Nigeria, there was this girl I photographed, and she was it just blew of the simplicity of it. If you can pause for a second, I can get that shot for you. Is that possible? For me to jump and get the shot?
How long is it gonna take you?
Like 10 seconds.
Hurry up. See the things that you do when people are your friends and you've known them for a while. But in all actuality,
Wait, can
ooh,
you see that shot?
yeah. Oh, she's pretty.
That was
Now,
originally
now tell the
in color.
story.
This was at the Abuja Carnival.
Okay.
Off to the bank. This was in color originally. And I made it black and white. Let me see if I can turn this.
But there's a little bit of color in the reflection. Just a
Yes,
tad.
just a tad, almost like a sepia tone.
Yeah.
See the
yeah. That's
beauty about
beautiful,
digital,
girl.
you can change the tones a bit.
And you captured the essence almost.
Yeah, it's the
In the
thing.
respect that
It's about her eyes. It was about her
yes,
eyes that
yes,
caught me, you know.
yes. Like she's a little shy about it.
Yeah, but at the same time, her posture was growing,
And
and
she looks happy in her
she
eyes.
wasn't about no more than about 4 feet, if that 3-4 feet tall. But she was just sitting there and having to capture that. There's a whole series from that Buja Carnival that have not been shown. That it's just blowing me away many times. There was some gentlemen that they rode in on horses and they left in Mercedes. so, so
that's beautiful.
Thank you.
That's beautiful. So, what advice would you have for somebody that's starting out? I mean, you're self-taught.
Yes.
So, for you, it's not necessarily about taking a class, but more or less about having the passion.
Yeah.
So explain that a little bit.
Well, the passion comes from your desire to want to do. And then I ask certain questions. What type of photography do you want to do? And based upon the answers, I ask them a series of various questions. I said, have you heard of Gordon Parks? They say, no. I said, well, look him up. I said, list me 10 types of photography. So based upon the answer, I can get a feel for, does he or she really want to do this? And then I kind of just narrow it down from there. There was a friend of mine's cousin that wanted to do photography. And I called her, we spoke for a little while. And she sent me an essay on Gordon Parks. Then she said she wanted to do fashion photography. I said, well, name one fashion photographer. And then I mentioned Matthew Jordan Smith, who does the fashion beauty with Essence. He's now one of the ambassadors with either at one point Nikon, and then he went to Sony. But these are people that are in the industry that are doing things worldwide. And I've met them, and they're very gracious people. This photography to me, like I said, now you have the collective there. Photography to me is a collective of mindsets across the board. There's talented photographers from coast to coast. Some are willing to open up to you, some are not. But then again, there are small groups here and there that have their own collectives. I don't belong to any of them, but I know who they are. So for me, that's important. And you look up their work, For example, Kamange is one of the oldest African American collectives that's going on around right now. They're having a current exhibit at the Met. So it's find your passion, find someone that you can talk to, open up. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You know,
as always.
As always.
That's the key in anything that you do. You have to be able to ask questions.
Yeah. And to me, it's about the process. If you understand the process of what you want to do, everything becomes easy. Like I said, I look at it as a jigsaw puzzle. Someone might look at it as something different. But to me, it's a jigsaw puzzle. You're putting the pieces together. And once you have your mind right to what you want to do, everything else falls into play. If you have the skill set and want to unfold yourself, I mean, you can go out there and say, well, I want to make a lot of money. But then again, you might be burned out.
Yeah.
But do you enjoy it? You know,
and that's the key.
Yeah, I've covered a lot of things. I've been very fortunate. At one point in the middle of my work, I picked AT&T and Time Warner for 2 years. That's all I did. All of their corporate work, their community work, and it was fun. Harlem Week was another one. I was there for 10 years. So most of my clients, I worked for a minimum 5 years with them. And those 5 years, I learned about them and they learn about me. But what it does, it makes it harder for the next person coming up behind me because I've left something.
Yeah.
I'm all of that, but I put something in place. And if you're going to come in, you have to do better than me because I've set a standard. And
that's who you are. You always set a standard.
And if you
our mutual friend told me that you are a hard act to follow. So
yeah, well, I mean, listen, he set the standard for a lot of people. I mean, hard work does pay off.
It does. It does.
And, it's a blessing. I mean, we can look back and all the accolades and all the degrees doesn't really help unless it does help. But at the end of the day, when you sit down and have to open up, what does it boil down to? Your hard work, the relationship, the time, sweat, equity. That piece of paper, no disrespect, is just that. It's just that. You know, it's an acknowledgement. I get it and I respect it. But when it comes down to it, it's hard work. The entrepreneurs every day going out here doing what they do to run a business. It's hard work. It's passion. It's commitment. I mean, they can say, well, you know, I make a lot of money. I mean, look at Leroy Campbell, the artist.
Yeah.
You know,
hard
work.
Hard work.
Werner Hart, hard work. You know,
all right, Gerald.
Yeah.
Got to shut it down.
Okay.
You know, you and I are always on the phone for hours.
Hey, can we come back at this? I like this. Can I come back?
You can come back. I'll let you come back next quarter. Okay.
Please do. Please do.
All right.
I think we can open it to a whole nother door. But I thought this was going to be a little crazy, and I was asking crazy questions. But this is fun. I thank you.
Thank you very much for saying yes. I appreciate your time and your energy. And I hope that you have continued success in what you do and do well.
Thank you very much.
Gerald Peart has been my guest this hour on The Collective. He is a renowned photographer in New York City and a buddy. And with that, this is episode 9 of The Collective. Have a good holiday.
Happy New Year to one and all. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you, Gerald. Appreciate you being here.
Okay.
Bye, Doc.